Thank you, everyone. Look, before I hand over to Michelle, look, it really is an honour and a pleasure. As you will be aware, Adele Hewlett, our libraries manager, passed away suddenly at her home in Temuka early on Saturday. Her creativity, innovation and energy for change and community connection, and this comes from a citation for the Lianza Library and Information Association of New Zealand award, which she received in November just gone. Her nominators said she's inspiring. She is an early adopter of new innovations who connect with others and bring them on the journey. Adele started as our libraries manager in 2018. She identified multiple opportunities to increase the library services offered, engage with the community and actively remove barriers. This was especially apparent over the last few years in the COVID environment. Adele took these challenges in her stride and set about providing much needed and appreciated support. The community focus that Adele and her team have developed gives connection, enjoyment and value on many levels. I think we'll all know and celebrate Adele as a real innovator in this space, and I think, you know, as far as the organisation, it's interesting that we look to the libraries and that's where we saw the innovation happening, and really cool to have that direct community contact with some really cool innovation. And just to name a few, the short stories vending machine, I think I heard the comment it had to be dialed back. It was a little bit raunchy, some of the stories that came from it at one point. But for kids and adults, and we've seen those vending machines out at the airports and what have you, so really cool innovation. Books for You for housebound services, delivering through COVID and some of those things, just to make sure that those services were still accessible. Nao the robot, if anyone has visited and seen him in action. The vaccine pass support for our most vulnerable, over 4,000 people had access via Adele and her team, and they just did such an amazing job for our community in supporting through that time. And my favourite, and I think it's up to us to get this one finished for her, but Peggy Squares and Blanket Forts. I think we can all draw a smile when we remember Adele and think of the largest blanket fort still to come. So a bit of pressure on us. We need to deliver for her legacy. We will miss our work colleague, our friend, our mentor for so many of you, and she will always live on, always within the organisation with such a legacy of innovation. Just from a personal note, I think, being the mayor of the district, and if you're one-on-one with Adele, you knew who the boss was, and it was Adele. I think we've all been in that situation. She was a real leader and just a wonderful woman, so we'll certainly miss her. And I just want to recognise, what she meant to all the staff in the organisation. And we're all here to support each other through this time, because it's going to be tough, but let's just remember her for the great innovator that she was and hold up her legacy. So thank you. We're all going to stand now and just have a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and please be seated, and appreciate all the staff making the effort to come and be in attendance.
Thank you, Nigel. I'd just like to welcome everyone to the Environmental Services Committee meeting. It's great to see so many members of the public here. Obviously a topic we have on the agenda that's of great interest to the wider community, so welcome everyone and thanks for attending. I'll just declare the meeting open at 10:06 and also welcome our community board members. So we have Gai Broker from Temuka Community Board, Kathy Wilkins from the Pleasant Point Community Board and Jan Finlayson from the Geraldine Community Board. So welcome ladies. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies, and I have an apology from Councillor Burt. Are there any other apologies? Could I have a mover for the apologies? Thank you, Councillor Booth, and seconder, Councillor Parker. Thank you. All in favour? Carried. Are there any items of urgent business? I haven't had any brought to my attention. And are there any items of a minor nature that anyone would like to raise? No. So we'll just move on to the declaration of the conflicts of interest. Are there any that anyone would like to declare before we start into the meeting topics? No. Okay, so just my chair's report. Sorry, I'll just pull that up. So since the last meeting on the 14th of March, alongside my normal council duties and community board members, I've attended a local alcohol policy meeting. I attended the Business After 5 hosted by the Chamber of Commerce at the museum. Along with Councillor Jackson, I've successfully finished the training for Making Good Decisions course, enabling us both to be commissioners on consent and plan hearings. Councillor Shannon and Councillor Scott have still awaiting their results, and I'd just like to actually congratulate Councillor Jackson on receiving an excellence mark for his work, so that's fantastic, well done. I've also visited the Rangitata Huts community to learn about some of the coastal erosion issues they're facing. I've attended an OTOP meeting. I attended a drop-in session at Temuka with Mayor Nigel and Councillor Shannon. What else have I done? I attended a strategy workshop at Pleasant Point that was held with the community. I, on behalf of Council, laid a wreath and spoke at both the Winchester and the Temuka Anzac Parade, Anzac services. And yesterday I attended a community welfare response forum relating to homeless issues in our region. So if anyone has any questions on any of that, otherwise I'll move the adoption of my report if I have a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Nigel. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. So we'll just move on to the confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 14th of March 2023. Are there any omissions or corrections for those minutes? Happy to move. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks. So we'll just move on to the one report that we have for this meeting that will take up the bulk of this meeting, and I'd like to welcome up Reese Taylor, Troy, are you coming up, and Dr. Phil Driver, who's going to present his report along with Andrew Dixon, our Group Manager for Infrastructure. So if I just, while you gentlemen are getting organised, just the purpose of the report is part of the long-term process. Council agreed, the long-term planning process, Council agreed to develop a Timaru District climate change strategy. And so as noted at point 1 of this report, the purpose of this report is to present the first Timaru District climate change strategy, which is attached to the report, and it has been created by an independent facilitator, Dr. Phil Driver, after extensive public engagements and workshops. So I will just hand over to the four of you to take us through the report. And I think we've allowed half an hour for the presentation. The longer you take, the less questions we'll have. So you might want to allow some time for the questions at the end. So that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Madam Chair, good morning, councillors and Mr Mayor. The piece of work which we're reporting on here is a work in progress. It's been produced by an independent facilitator contracted to the council, who's engaged with a large team of volunteers drawn from the public to follow on from an initial set of interviews that were done. The work involved has looked at possibilities for a climate change response district-wide. It's the first stage of this work, and as Dr. Ive will be describing to you, it's a process of trying to engage as many ideas from as many quarters as possible. For reference, in the table where our Chief Executive is sitting, you'll see all the posters which announced the succession of public events in which we had good participation, not just in the public, but also from several of the councillors as well. And we've appreciated that input for the quality of the work done. The key point for me to note, Madam Chair, is that this is a work in progress. It's a document that collects the information that was made available to us and tries to organise it. The work will then be picked up by your staff team, who will look at the aspects that are reasonable and relevant for the district council to work upon. In other words, we'll look at the ideas from that which we have legal power to act upon and we have potential motivation to act upon, and we'll put those ideas together so that they can be considered by the council as we move towards the next long-term plan. There may be actions we can start quickly even from it, which would be encouraging, I think, given the urgency of the international and national issues involved. I think it's probably a sufficient introduction. Myself and our fellow officers will give Phil room to do this now. We'll move back a seat. And I'd like to welcome to you and commend to you Dr. Phil Driver, who's put a huge amount of effort into this project on our behalf.
Thanks for your introduction, Rhys, and hello, councillors and mayor. A key point I want to reiterate is that my report is a report by, for and with the community. It's not explicitly a report to council. You are one of many stakeholders. So there's nothing in my report that binds anybody to any action. It's simply saying this is what the community thinks needs to happen. It's up to you as a governance body to decide which of that to pick up and run with. I'm presenting on behalf of our community. I've had quite a few apologies of people who would like to be here, couldn't make it. Climate change is an enormous topic. I'm sure you've read my 74-page report and digested it all. That's the first stage. We're probably looking at 200 to 300 pages by the time we address all topics. So it's a compendium of information. We've received hundreds of ideas from the communities through 8 3-hour workshops with the public. I'd very much like to thank our community who are here. They've provided invaluable ideas throughout the process. I'd like to thank staff, especially Andrew, for having supported me through this, and Rhys and Troy, who've been invaluable through the workshops. Particularly like to thank Michelle and Nigel, who have turned up to quite a lot of our meetings. You're on our advisory committee, and I've received a lot of positive feedback from the community saying thank you for respecting the problems that are out there or the challenges we've got. The fact you were there really made a difference. So my agenda, next slide, here we go. So I'm just going to touch very briefly on some of the key messages because they're in my report, touch on your commitments, talk about the difference between governance and management, the fact you've been appreciated, your leadership, you stepped into a space you didn't need to step into, but you've done it anyway, and that's been acknowledged. 2 key governance issues that we want to address, and then we'll come on to the discussion after that. So the key climate messages are on the front of my report, the first 3 of those in particular, or in fact I suppose all 4. It's unequivocal, and by that the scientists mean that climate change is happening and we are causing it, and the possibility that that's not true is 3 parts in a million. So it's 5 sigma confidence. The impacts are inevitable, they're happening already. There are houses going underwater already. We don't have to take action. That's a choice that needs to be made at governance level, at council level, on a lot of these issues, because many of the issues are not actually legislatively required by you. In fact, they're not legislatively required by anybody. And so if council doesn't step in and take action on some of these issues, there's a risk that nobody else will either. So that's a real challenge for councillors to get their head around which of those actions are really significant and you choose to ignore them or not is your choice. The constraints we're facing is what I call climate action hesitancy. A lot of people say, yeah, we've got to get on and do something about climate change as long as everybody else does it. And there's a whole range of reasons for that. Some of the actions that people would be prepared to take are actually not enabled. It's all very well to say to everybody, use public transport, but if it's not available, they can't do it. Lack of locally specific information. We've got technical or geophysical information on where the sea's going to end up, the coastal erosion. What we haven't got is information on what's the cost to our overall community. For example, if you have to shift the main trunk line, and I'll come on to that. So a lot of the financial, social, environmental and cultural costs we don't know, and that's where we've got to get a lot more information. Legislative uncertainty, the RMA is being changed. A key change is going to be the National Adaptation Plan, because that is going to have clauses in there about compensation. And it doesn't matter how many plans you come up with, a lot of people won't act unless they know who's going to pay for it. Are they going to pay for it? Is somebody else going to pay for it? So we're a bit stuck there until we get some of that central government legislation coming through. Table 2, 2.1 in my report, I've made a stab at the scale of the challenges that we're facing. What's the scale of the losses? And if we look at something like agriculture, value 1.6 billion, something like that in our district, if that gets a 10% hit from a single climate event, that's a $160 million hit in one go. We put that in the context of Cyclone Gabriel, that the cost of that's estimated between $9 and $11 billion. So the scale of the challenges we're facing is huge. So we've gone through those constraints. So council has already made these commitments, be a climate-friendly council, lead and facilitate mitigation and adaptation projects with others, and encourage others to learn and adapt. So it's point 2 that we're working on at the moment. We're developing a community strategy, and you have been enabling that to happen by funding my time and providing Reece and Troy, and before that Rosie Oliver, and also members of your staff, Michelle Bunt and Grant Hall and many others who have been coming along to our meetings and making quite superb contributions. In fact, if you want to know anything about water, Michelle Bunt is a walking Google about water. You can ask her anything. It's incredible resources that you've got there. Many companies and farmers are already spending millions of dollars on adapting to climate change in our district already, and many are already suffering. A couple of examples: the Peel Forest flood a few months ago, one farmer lost 80 grand. One farmer we've spoken to has so far had 40 hectares of his land affected by salt. And if you look at dairy land worth 30 grand a hectare, times 40 hectares, the sum comes out to $1.2 million worth of one farmer's land already affected by salt. It's real, it's here, it's happening. So your staff are already doing what's legislatively required, and they're working, furiously on that sort of stuff and putting recommendations to you. However, a lot of what's happening out in the community is not in the arena for staff to make decisions about. It's in your arena as governance. So if we've got a stressed out community at the huts, for example, and they need help to work collectively to make a decision on, do they retreat, do they put their houses on sticks, or do they let the wetland come in and farm it for aquaculture? So there's positive and negative opportunities. Half the American seafood harvest comes from wetlands. So there's some potential enormous gains. Who's responsible for pursuing those ideas? At the moment, legislatively, nobody. And I guess what our communities are saying, it would be awesome if somebody stepped up to at least keep taking a lead on that, keep enabling somebody to keep looking at those big issues. I'd have to say I've been really privileged and proud to be the public face of TDC throughout this work. The support I've received and the dedicated input from so many people has been, really rewarding. And I'd have to say, makes me feel nervous that I can fairly represent all the views or all the information that's given to me, but I'm doing my best on that. The Climate Change Commission has noticed what we're doing, and they're coming to visit us on the 10th of May. So I think that's pretty significant. They've released their latest advice. There's some copies of a summary over there if anybody wants any. And we can either passively let the Commission tell us what to do, like government did with Three Waters, or we can step up and say, we need to tell the Commission what we need in this district. And that's the approach I would encourage that we take as a governance role, as councillors, to step up and lead on that, while at the same time acknowledging the challenge you face to each of you try and get your head around all this stuff. It is huge. And this is why I come back to that recommendation towards the end. I think we need to set up a very professional trust or incorporated society to pull that information together and make robust recommendations to you, rather than relying on one person like me making those recommendations. It's got to come from a more robust body. The complexity we're facing, and I'll just go quickly through the coastal settlements. We've got erosion problems, and that's due to many things. Sea level rise, we've got bigger storm surges, we've got bigger waves coming in from offshore storms, and loss of gravel that is no longer coming down the Waitaki River. So those are all compounding. So that's erosion of the coastline happening at 2 metres a year at the moment. Inundation, which is flooding rather than erosion, that's also caused by sea level rise. Lagoons being overwhelmed from river flooding. So the lagoon at Milford has shrunk substantially, so when we get a big flood coming down the river, it fills up really fast and floods the homes much more quickly than it used to. So there's multiple effects happening there. Civil defence, I know, are working really hard to address people's lives out there. Is our community ready to act? The people in the huts, some people are saying, I'm ready to leave now. Others are saying, I want to stay here till the last minute. Some are saying, we want to go individually. Some are saying, we want to go collectively. And they're really looking for help and facilitation and guidance to collectively reach a decision as to what's going to work for them. And that's then going to have big implications on planning. They don't know if there's going to be any compensation. I think government will make some available, probably not very much. Then managed retreat. It was interesting at one of the workshops we had on coastal inundation and erosion. There was all sorts of things being put on the table, a lot of reluctance to act, and our mayor stepped in, Nigel, thank you very much, and he changed the tone of the meeting with a single sentence, essentially saying, I think managed retreat has to be on the table. And coming from the mayor, coming from one of the leaders in our community, that really made a difference. It enabled a whole lot of people to say, actually, yes, perhaps we need to at least have that on the table. What does managed retreat mean? Where are they going to go to? If they want to move as a community, the communities are saying we want to keep our community cohesion, we want to stay close to the river, so they want to move upstream up the river, but that's farmland, so that would need rezoning to enable that to happen. So just on that issue alone, we're looking at tens of millions of dollars of costs. And we all like pictures, so there's the Milford huts. So see the coastline on the right. 30 years ago, that coastline was 60 metres further out to sea. So that has moved inland by 60 metres in the last 30 years. The lagoon is shrinking, and so it's flooding much, much more quickly. Another example, main trunk line. There's threats to that at the moment from climate change. That will have a huge impact on the port, of which you're a shareholder, and transport. The railway is currently acting as a stop bank, and it's protecting the Redruth landfill, and it's protecting a lot of farms. So if the railway line were moved, it's going to have a lot of impacts other than just transport. It's going to affect a lot of other land, including Redruth. So is KiwiRail going to protect the existing line or shift it? And if anybody can find an answer from KiwiRail, I'd love to hear it, because we've been trying to get the answer to that question. Somebody might know. I'm hoping Susie Ratahi might be able to answer that for us at some point. If the line has to be moved, there'll be major issues on land rezoning and purchase for relocation. And if you move the railway line south of the port, where's it going to go? Potential cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And just look at this picture. we started visiting this area in 2013, we used to walk along the seaside of the railway line through coastal dunes that were 10 to 15 metres wide. They're not there anymore. And that's just since 2013, 10 years. Those rocks are temporary because the coastline isn't just moving at the surface, the entire beach is eroding, going out several hundred metres into the sea. So the coastline is sinking in effect. And if you think a stopback's going to hold it, have a look at that photo. So we've got a 10-metre high cliff essentially, and that is also eroding at a metre or so per year. So a big wall, a big stop bank isn't going to stop the sea level rise and the bigger storms and the bigger waves we've got coming in. And just going back to that photo, Redruth landfill is on the far left. If we have a sea level rise of 0.4 metres, the sea will be lapping Redruth landfill. Tonkin and Taylor's report is saying we should plan on 0.8 metres, so double that sea level rise by about 2100. So if that railway line goes, that coastal erosion is going to happen a lot faster and it's going to come in towards the Redruth landfill. You've got huge expense already removing the landfill down at Peel Forest. That will be a pittance compared to trying to manage the impact of the sea on Redruth. Now I'm making some somewhat speculative statements here. We need something like a trust of professional people to work out, are my statements valid or not, and to put real hard numbers on them. I've done my best on this with a lot of input from our communities. Another final one is the impacts on our communities, and these bullet points came out of the Tonkin and Taylor report on a risk assessment for the Canterbury area, severe weather storms and so on, wildfires. I'm a trustee for a property at Ohau. I know exactly what it's like when a wildfire goes through an area that is really precious to you. We're getting sustainability demands from overseas customers. Tesco has already said to New Zealand farmers, if you don't produce stuff sustainably, we're going to stop buying it. Canada has already stopped buying some of our seafood because we're not protecting our Maui dolphins. So our markets are going to be impacted by people from overseas, by what's happening overseas. A really big one that most of us, or I think many people ignore, is this one, climate refugees. Currently in Asia, this is their springtime, they're experiencing a heat wave of temperatures of 40 degrees in springtime. Because of the high humidity, the effective temperature is 54 degrees. That is completely unlivable. And so the forecasts are that within the next few decades, there will be 2 billion climate refugees. These are people mainly at either side of the equator who have nowhere to go. If New Zealand accepts their share of those refugees, and if South Canterbury accepts our share of that, we're going to be looking at 20 to 30,000 climate refugees coming here. If I'm wrong, I'd love the data. If I'm right, how are we going to manage that? That could be managed in a way that makes this place absolutely thrive. Are we going to welcome peasant farmers who can grow an awful lot of food on a small bit of land with low inputs, or are we going to welcome computer scientists and fashion designers? If the climate refugees are coming, we're not going to have a lot of choice about them coming. So it's a topic I think we've really got to get our heads around, and that's not a topic for staff to get their head around, it's a topic for your level of governance to get your head around. All of these will contribute to farm production losses. I say 10% of $1 billion, if we have an event that causes a 10% loss, we're looking at 100 million from a single event. And I think that's hugely conservative if you look at the impact of Cyclone Gabrielle at 9 to 11 billion. Some homes are already being damaged right now out in the huts. Farms are being lost. Our communities, and this is really important, are getting very, very stressed, but there's a potential to convert stress into invigoration. Can we convert retreat from a piece of land to changing the story so it becomes movement to a better situation, not a worse situation. And that will take a lot of leadership to get those stories across. So I think, you know, as you see in my table 2.1, we're looking at costs in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And just as a simple example, there's the Rangitata and floods. Worldwide, a lot of countries are removing stop banks or accepting that stop banks are no longer the solution to rivers. If we look at the Nile Delta, they welcome the flood because it makes the ground incredibly fertile while they plant into the flooded land immediately after flooding. I'm not saying that's going to work here. The professors of civil engineering from Auckland and Canterbury University a couple of years ago put out a report saying we got it wrong. We should not have converted our alpine rivers into drains to try and make the water move to the coast as fast as possible. We should have done everything we could to hold the water back. And that means wetlands, revegetation of the high country, swales and so on. So we've got some major issues coming down the line in terms of management of our major rivers. I was asked to create this climate change strategy, and as Rhys said, we've got started on it. We established an advisory group of 24 people, and that includes our mayor and chair of the Environmental Services Committee, and a whole lot of really committed individuals from our community, ranging from, you know, chief executives, we've had dairy farmers, we've had climate deniers, every walk of life. We've had 8 incredibly energetic workshops, hundreds and hundreds of suggestions coming through. From that, we distilled a set of 10 principles, which are in the report. Principles are crucially important. We agree on them, then we probably put them in a filing cabinet and get on with the job. The principles are not the strategy. They simply guide our behaviour. We've started on what we call sub-strategies. We've partly addressed 6 of them, and there's about another 11 we haven't even touched on yet. Some of those other strategies, like the resilience of the electrical network, Alpine Energy is doing a major strategy on that right now. And they're looking at the impact of climate change, but also the impact of alpine fault cracking, which I think has a 75% probability of rupturing in the next 50 years. And that will take out all the hydro dams, which will mean we'll be without electricity for months. So AF8, as it's called, and resilience to climate change have an enormous amount of overlap. If we can build resilience to climate change, we will build resilience to AF8. But that's, again, it's high level, it's governance thinking has to go into that. As I said, staff are distilling what you're legislatively required to do. And the question is, do you want to keep operating at a governance level, taking on initiatives that nobody else is taking on, even though you're not legislatively required to do so? So the couple of big governance issue is quantifying the local climate change impacts, not just the geophysical, we know where the coastline is going to go to. What's the cost of that on the main trunk line and the farms that are protected by that? So the financial implications by my table 2.1, I think, are adding up to many hundreds of millions per year, potentially billions. And a Cyclone Gabriel, of course, would make all that pale into insignificance. Who's going to keep driving it? Is it what I'm calling TDC governance thinkers, i.e. yourselves or people within staff who take a governance approach, a high-level approach? Is it going to be delegated to external sources? Are you going to delegate it to ECAN or some central government agency, or my recommendation, some form of trust or society? Or, you know, are multiple agencies going to look after making future recommendations? And who's going to pull together the continuing development of those sub-strategies? So the question for you is, are you going to continue your local leadership? You've earned a lot of credibility in the leadership that's gone so far. As I said, I've been really proud to represent the council in these workshops, and I thank you for your support. So I've recommended what I'm calling a South Canterbury Climate Trust, or similar, it might be an incorporated society, to guide everybody's governance. And I've graphed out a few ideas on it. I think it's got to involve the community councils, multiple agencies, Alpine Energy perhaps, professionals. It's got to independently and objectively answer these questions, which is what I've been trying to do on behalf of the community, but we need a more robust entity to do that. What impacts are likely? What are the big ones? Who and what will be impacted? What actions will increase resilience? Who should lead on each issue? And the legislation simply isn't clear. And this trust needs to make public recommendations for action. So they're not recommendations to ECAN, to TDC. They're simply saying these actions need to take place. It's then your choice to say, we think these particular ones fall under the gambit of Timaru District Council. But I think I would encourage you to support such a trust to pull that information together. I'm using the word trust because this entity needs to be absolutely robust. It needs to pass scrutiny from business leaders like Councillor Alan Booth. It's got to pass project management scrutiny from people like Councillor Tracy Scott. It's got to pass scrutiny from agriculture sector leaders like Councillor Michelle Pye. This is not a bunch of people sitting at the back room talking about, growing a few more cabbages in the backyard. This is serious stuff. And so I think the trust has got to include professionals. They've got to include a very tightly worded trust deed that specifies exactly what the trust is going to achieve by when. And I'm encouraging the idea that the trust perhaps covers all of South Canterbury rather than just the Timaru district. And funding from all agencies, and I would be thinking here of councils putting money in, ECAN putting money in, maybe trying to get some from the likes of Alpine Energy, but also going to central government because they've got some major funding on climate change and putting a really compelling argument to them. Because a lot of what we're doing absolutely aligns with the latest report from the Climate Change Commission. So I think we would have their support. Just some quick urgent things that we need to address is the coastal inundation of the settlements. That can't really wait much longer. Understanding the impacts on the main trunk line, that is short term, like a few years away. A big one is the lack of domestic food resilience. 95% of our food that we eat here comes from outside the district. I was blown away by that statistic. Half of that comes from overseas. So when Cyclone Gabriel hits Hawke's Bay, that affects our food resilience down here, and that's why our prices all went up for fruit and vegetables. And so our communities are saying, we've got to do much better than relying on 95% of our food coming from outside the district. And as you'll see in my report, there's a whole lot of other topics that we haven't even had time to look at yet. So final slide, my recommended next steps is that a South Canterbury Climate Trust or Society be established. Someone needs to design that. We need to select the trust members. What are the criteria for that? The trust has to answer the big questions and start pulling strategic ideas together and make public recommendations on climate actions. The second thing is staff need to continue to pull out of my report and other reports what TDC is legislatively required to do, and Reece and Troy and Hamish and others are on the case already. And obviously then actually take action. In terms of the design of the trust, because this trust is something that is, I believe, needs to be established out in the community, it's not a Timaru District Council offshoot, it's out in the community. I'm volunteering to work with community members over the next 2 weeks to put a robust proposal to all members of our community and to council by Friday of next week. So that will be my attempt at a trust deed, at some rules around membership and what I believe that trust needs to do. So I'll produce that report and submit it to you and everybody else to do whatever you like with it. It'll obviously go to people like Andrew to decide what they want to do with it. So that's my presentation. I think I've kept it under the half hour, Michelle, and open to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Just before I open up for questions, and I'm conscious of time, I just would like to caution councillors not to start a science debate here. Whatever your view on climate change, I think we can all agree that we have some urgent issues in the Timaru district that we need to address, like the coastal inundation that Dr. Driver has referred to. So I'm just encouraging you, rather than focusing on the things that you may disagree with in the report, can we just focus on what the next steps should be? And I think we'll end up with some solutions then, rather than just agreeing to disagree. So I'll open up with that to the councillors if anyone has any questions or comments. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. You're on your page 38 of your 75 report.
I'm encouraged you've read to page 38 of them. Big report. Thank you for doing that.
So collaborate with commercial food producers, work with commercial food producers, processors and industry to inspire and document ways to increase the amount of food that's produced for local rather than international consumption. So how would you see that as I mean, McCain's, do you want everyone to be growing small plots of potatoes or something? Or
No.
So explain what you mean by that.
Okay. I'll address the plots of potato one. If 10% of homes in Timaru grew food, in order to feed the district, each of those homes would have to produce 65 kilos of food per day. That's not the solution. The solution will come from the commercial sector. And so right now, Lincoln University has got a postgraduate program looking at what alternative crops would be better to be growing in Canterbury. And so we're planning a workshop on the 10th of July, open to the public, where I'm hoping to get speakers from there to say, these are the things we could be doing differently here, some of which could be consumed locally rather than primarily growing for export. So while I've had 5 years at Lincoln in agricultural production, I'm certainly not the expert in this field.
What's the point of
actually
it
challenged
being?
me on this in one of our workshops, saying, Phil, you're not going to grow enough vegetables in people's backyards. It's got to come from the commercial sector.
So what's this got to do with the direct implications that we actually are responsible for in order to put something around? Probably what I can see is what coastal inundation, I can see that's an issue. But I see this stuff coming up in such things as this in your report. I don't really see how relevant it is to our ratepayer who actually are going to foot the bill, and they're actually footing this bill for your report.
Yep, that's a good business question.
How is it relevant? I mean, what's it got to do with things here?
And it's an excellent question, and to some extent it's your choice as to whether you think this is your area of responsibility. So why I think it's your area of responsibility is that part of climate change, we're going to get a lot more diseases and pests going through a lot of our crops, which will become unviable. So the economy will be stretched by climate change, and then if we then encourage, for example, the growing of hemp, then there are rules around that which have to go into the district plan. So the different types of crops, whether it's pine trees or oak trees or whatever you grow, will be impacted by the district plan. So elements of these issues are relevant to the council. And I think the role I'm encouraging the council to play here is to help your communities work out what they can do and then come back to you and say, look, in order for us to grow different food, we need you in council. Can you tweak this? Can you change a little bit here and there, and then so that we can get on with it? So it's not that you're going to take a lead on these issues. It's more a case of helping the communities work out what needs doing and then be responsive when they come back with specific requests.
Just before we carry on, Councillor Booth, Councillor Scott has something to add.
Sorry, just to add to that, with my Venture Timaru hat, we're actually doing that work, Dr. Phil. So I encourage you to speak with Nigel Davenport. We've commissioned a report that looks at alternative crop options, and we're looking at resilient crops throughout the region. So we're actually commissioning a report. We've actually got a working group as well.
That's good. Thanks for the update.
So I encourage you to connect with him because we've actually started some of that work.
Yep. So I have had conversations with Nigel, but I hadn't realised it had progressed so far.
Yes,
So
it has.
that's exactly the sort of feedback I'm looking for, because I've got this deluge of information coming to me. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Mayor Nigel has something to add as well.
Oh, look, yeah, thanks. And I think, a really good point around what VT are doing. And I think the key thing is that needs to come out of this is what are the priority areas for what group and who actually leads that moving forward. And, no one wants to replicate work that's already being done. And that's the key thing. And that's across other forums such as Canterbury Mayors and, national work and those sort of things as well. So, for me, this is around how we get our next steps for what are the key things, priorities that TDC should be lining up, what are some that might sit out within the community, what are some of the things that we need to advocate for, such as, better alignment with the energy strategy with, ECA. We know that, they're funding decarbonisation, but actually haven't thought about future energy needs. And so it's where it all fits. But you raise a very good point that we don't want to duplicate anything that's already been done out there.
Correct. Yep.
I will come back to you if you have other questions, Councillor Booth, but we'll just go to Councillor Piddington.
Thanks, Phil. Look, it's a really good report, but for me it's just too big. I mean, as a council, we need to focus, because everything we do is a cost to the ratepayers. I'm not a climate denier, it's real, absolutely, but things like the coastal communities, yes, we need to deal with that, and there needs to be an organised retreat. We've seen what's happened in Gisborne. Another thing the council needs to be doing is ensuring we have resilient infrastructure. So if we have a weather event, we still have roads and can deliver water. I mean, I get your point about rising oceans and refugees, but I don't think we take 2,000 refugees a year at the moment under a variety of things. So the stuff in there, unfortunately, I think is just too big for us. It's an acknowledgement. So actually, we need some time to digest this, I think, before we vote on going any further, and actually fine with the trust and moving that forward. That seems like a good idea, but some of these statements are just too big to digest, and we really need to bring it back to something real that we can deliver in council that affects our community immediately. And those wider goals later on, the trust can be involved in that, however it's set up. But the problem I see in that is Mackenzie District Council have no interest in coastal inundation, because they don't have a coast. So I mean, and I'm a bit wary of creating yet another group, whatever they are, without having really specific goals around and things that are achievable, just not broad statements. So that's where I said I think we should, because I wasn't really, to be honest, I had to read the report a couple of times to see what the actual recommendations are and where we're going forward. So I don't want to adopt something we don't really understand where it's going.
So can I comment on that? And I think this is where it's really important to distinguish between my report, which is a community report, and the report from Rhys and Andrew, which is the recommendations to council. So my recommendations are not recommendations to council, they're simply saying these things need to be done. So refer to the much shorter report from Andrew and Rhys on that. I think in terms of can I write a shorter report, the answer is no, because the sheer scale of what we're addressing, it's like trying to write a short report on the economic system of the planet. Climate change is massive, there's many, many issues, and I've made it as short as possible. Honestly, that 74-page report is the short version.
Look, I'm not arguing on that. What I'm saying is even Rhys's recommendations, I don't really understand what we're recommending.
Yep, and so this is where rather than me as one person making recommendations, you're saying, well, do we trust Phil as one person? This is where I think if you had a trust where the trust has people who have got the time to really look into the issues and they come forward with recommendations, that's going to be a hell of a lot more robust. And I think that's what you need to support you, because for all of you to try and get your heads around this is impossible. It's a huge topic. And I think you need this trust as a credible body to advise you alongside your own staff advising you on what is immediately relevant. And I think we need the two going in parallel.
I've already said I think the trust is a good idea, but we need to know how we're funding it. I'm not agreeing to something and then it's 100K from us. It needs to be much more robust than set up a trust with these representatives.
That's why I'm going to get a proposal to you by the end of next week.
Okay. I stand by my points that
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's very confusing what we're actually trying to do here. And I'd like to see us work through something with Michelle to something far more succinct, so we all understand what we're buying into and agreeing. Because some of these are national issues. And when we sat at this table, Phil, we agreed we didn't want to go down that rabbit hole of trying to do something that needs to be nationally driven.
Agreed, totally.
Because it just won't work.
Yep, agreed. Yep. Thanks, Stu.
Certainly, the next stage is for us to go through this report and basically disseminate what council can control and what we should be doing. And so this is really just a report on the outcome of all the community discussions that have been had, a whole lot of ideas, and then, some of them will be council initiatives, others will be community initiatives, and maybe the trust is used for that vehicle to progress those ones. But that is the next step. This is just a lead-in. Is there anything you want to say, Reg?
I think the only thing I'd add is that the specific recommendations on page 11 of your document are clear in the sense they're saying to receive and note this report as a community view.
Yeah, we might, sorry to interrupt Mr Taylor, but we might just come back to them because I will work through all of those recommendations once all the councillors have had their interruptions. Sorry. Councillor Shannon.
Thank you, and thanks very much for your presentation. It was a thorough read. And to follow on from what Councillor Piddington was actually saying and why I came along here today a little bit confused about what I was doing as well, because the recommendations don't actually say what you're saying to us about going away and coming back effectively. The recommendations actually are quite clear that we are to receive and note and draft the climate change strategy and endorse it for wider publication, for example. And it, with regards to the recommendations, and there's only two options there, which effectively suggests that all of your recommendations, Dr. Phil, are what we would effectively be adopting today. So maybe it's the wording of the report, but that's where the confusion lay with me.
Thanks. Are there any other general comments or questions before we move to talking through each of the recommendations? Yeah, Mayor Nigel?
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think point number 3 probably, and I know Michelle's going to take us, sorry, Councillor Pye's going to take us through it, but, that further report to what other council activities and priorities is coming at a later date. So, look, take the comments, but I think there's more. This is sort of first step, if you like. So, yeah.
Councillor Scott.
Sorry, I just want to acknowledge and thank everyone, obviously including you, Dr. Phil, but the wider team, your 25 members and all the community that participated in your workshops to get to this stage. For me, I felt that our responsibilities too is about reducing our debt levels so we can be responsive to climate change and so that we can mitigate it. So for me, those accurate modelling around the economic impacts will be really important to someone like me, the positives and the negatives to climate change. You could listen to Dr. Elizabeth Mackenzie, the past ECAN councillor who would suggest that climate change would be good for South Canterbury, warmer weather, higher rainfall, increased productivity. So, there's the way we need to look at both ways of looking at climate change in a positive and definitely a negative light. Obviously, coastal inundation in our coastal is real, it's there and it's happening, as you say, at a rapid rate. So for me, I really appreciate this report. It did take me 2 nights to get through it, to really to make sure that I was informed today. But I would really like to see some more work, that's coming out from the ECAN strategy, the Canterbury Mayoral Forum's climate change strategy that I think is not far off as well. And obviously those central government legislations is going to be key to how we progress locally as well. So, and just around that trust, I do like the idea. I'm hesitant to go, yes, run off, let's go with it. I'd love to see it back in the strategy and how that's going to work. definitely not opposed to that. I think that's really a good idea, but I'd just like to see some more work around how that strategy, that fits in with the overall strategy. So that's just my personal views on the trust. But thank you very much to everyone for their work.
Yeah, sure.
Just a quick comment in terms of the positives and negatives of climate change. They're going to affect different people. So some people are going to do very well out of it, and some people are going to be absolutely shattered. And the message, I think it was this first of our principles, was around equity, is can those who are going to do well support those who aren't? And that just came through from everybody in our communities. It's one of the reasons we shifted here. I was looking all over Canterbury for somewhere to live, and I found the strength of community here was unexpectedly good. I came out of the Christchurch earthquakes, been through a community growing and then dying again. So after the earthquakes, we had a really strong community. Within weeks, it had faded away. And yet I came down here and the sense of community was stronger and permanent and resilient. And I think that's something we really can build on. And this is where I think if through the trust or other mechanism, council and others can help facilitate the constant building of that trust, the constant collaboration, I think is where we really can make a difference. So I appreciate your points and thank you for reading the report.
Thank you. I'm conscious, Councillor Booth, that I interrupted you before. Did you have anything else to add? Or? Yep, so okay. Thank you. So we'll just move to the recommendations at the report. Before we do, I haven't really made any of my own comments, but I'm just conscious that we are looking at a 12.5% rate rise for the next year, and we need to be really clear about where we spend our money as a council. And I'm also conscious that we actually need some actions, and so I think thank you for the time and effort of yourself and the community, and some of those issues have been highlighted through this process. You talked about the farmers, that have got some pressing needs on their properties, along with hut owners out along the coast, and I think that's where our main focus should be on where can we get the quick wins, so to speak, and actually get some action, rather than spending another 6 months or 2 years talking about what we're going to do again. So that's probably a key focus that I want to see come out of this personally. So recommendation 1 is that we receive and note the draft Timaru District climate change strategy and endorse it for wider publication. I do actually have some concerns about endorsing it for wider publication, in that if you don't have the context that we've just been given in this room, it may have the potential to confuse people what this actual document is. It's actually already in the public domain anyway on council's website, but that's only my view. I mean, is there somebody who wants to put the recommendation as it stands and a seconder, or do we want to change the recommendation? Councillor Piddington.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, that was kind of my problem. We need to give it some context and what we're hoping to get out of it. Because if we put out there your point about ratepayers, what's this going to cost? It doesn't, to me, by endorsing it, have any context around it. So, as you say, it's already in the public domain, and maybe that's a later step once we get further down the track.
Michelle, can I comment on that? I think the word endorse is a wee bit too strong. I'd be inclined to say receive and appreciate the report. I think endorse is probably going a wee bit too far.
Yeah, so my recommendation, depending on the views of other councillors in the room, was going to be that we just receive and note the draft Timaru District climate change strategy and stop it there. So it looks like Councillor Shannon would like to move that, and I can see Councillor Oliver nodding. Is that a seconder? Is there any other discussion or comments on that? All in favour? Sorry, did you want to say something, Councillor Booth?
Well, look, I really consider this report as speculative and quite a radical interpretation of what your thoughts are, and so and unequivocal. There's some words in there. I just think it's just not something that is really. It goes way too far, in my opinion, and certainly we can only base our decisions around facts and what is real. And certainly, I've got an appreciation for the the potential of coastal inundation. So, and we have actually taken care of that in regards to our draft plan. We've moved the lines back to take into consideration for any potential issues. So, I mean, I just think no to. Well, I think I do support doing literally what you've suggested, but I wasn't very happy with the recommendations and the options. Thank you.
Okay, so the resolution on the floor is that we receive and note, that was all, the draft Timaru District climate change strategy. I had a mover from Councillor Shannon and a seconder Councillor Oliver. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So we'll just move to recommendation 2, which is to acknowledge the valuable voluntary contribution of councillors, the advisory committee and the many participants in the 8 public workshops. Well, I think, well, actually I won't tell you what I think. Do we have a mover or a seconder for that? Thank you, Mayor Bowen, and a seconder, Councillor Oliver. Any comment or discussion on that? What I was going to actually say is that I 100% agree with that. So all in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. So we'll move on to recommendation number 3. The recommendation as it stands is note that a further report and action plan on recommendations distilled from the draft Timaru District Climate Change Strategy that are relevant to council activities will be presented at the July meeting. Do I have somebody who would like to move and second that, or is there somebody that would, or is there discussion on that particular point? I'll just go in order across the table. Mayor Nigel, Councillor Piddington and Councillor Shannon, were you wanting to comment? Or?
I'll comment, but I'm happy to move that as is. I mean, I think that's the natural next steps. I think probably we're likely to be all in agreement on the priority actions such as coastal inundation. There's conversations with KiwiRail around trunk line protection. There's stuff that, has been noted around, Canterbury Mayoral Forum priorities, which is around river resilience and protection and some of those sort of things. So I think this is fine with the direction and where we're going to see the priorities, Milford, Huts and the other coastal settlements. I think we're likely to be all in line, so I'm very comfortable as it is here.
Councillor Piddington, did you have some comment?
Oh, sorry, Stu.
Yeah, who is doing that report and who's deciding what's being distilled? Because I'd like to know a bit of the process around it, because you've already talked about the Canterbury Mayoral Forum. It's quite a big piece of work if we're going to do it properly. And, July's not far away.
And I agree, and I'm reluctant to spend more ratepayer money where ratepayers are also paying ECAN to do a draft climate change strategy, and there's at the Canterbury Mayoral Forum. So I don't know if Mayor Nigel would like to talk to this, but my preference is it's done within council.
Yeah, totally agree in that. And although there is some work that we don't want to duplicate being done, that Canterbury stuff, some of that will be advocating across Canterbury, going to central government, but it's not going to identify what the priorities are that sit within our district. Same with other climate change work. So I think, this is actually about our district. What are the key priorities, for us, and that's where the action plan. So it's going to be driven by us, and I agree it needs to be, driven by the in-house team. Thank you.
Any other? Councillor Shannon, sorry, did you have a comment on that?
It was actually the same. Who was going to distill and bring back the plan? So it's been answered.
Mr. Taylor, you have a comment?
Yes, Councillor. The approach is going to be a series of steps, inevitably, but I think it should be possible for your staff team to produce the main headlines and to say these are the areas from within the initial work that appear to have a clear home within the council. They relate to, for example, infrastructure that we're responsible for maintaining. They have a very geographic focus on issues with which we're already engaged, like the coastal communities. So it'll be a shorter list of work. Alongside that, we're staying in touch with our colleagues in Environment Canterbury and elsewhere who are looking at the bigger picture, but they are moving at quite a slow pace. We are moving faster, and they are available to advise us and share information with us, particularly sharing information. They're doing a lot of information gathering, which we have no need to duplicate. So we'll identify what they gather, and because of our role at the moment through the Mayor and the Chief Executive on the Mayoral Forum, we're in a very good position to ask for that help. But this will be staff-led in terms of proposals. It will then help inform our debate, which will be open to the public again, on the long-term plan. So we've got two stages of looking at it. Our internal consideration, which relates to our action planning and ordinary budgeting within, for example, the whole area of infrastructure, and then what we may do as our actions in the long-term plan, which puts it back in the hands of the public to influence the decision-making and by implication the spending.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. Any other comments? Would someone like to move the recommendation number 3 as it is currently worded? Thank you, Mayor Bowen. A seconder. I'll look to the other side of the table. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Any further comments or discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation number 4, that we support in principle preparations to create a trust or similar entity outside council to take forward aspects of the draft Timaru District Climate Change Strategy that are of concern to the community but may not be central to the District Council statutory functions. Are there any comments or feedback on that recommendation, Mayor Nigel?
Look, I'm happy to support it as is, taking to account the comments that have already been made. There again, there's more work to be done on who pays, etc. But also what are the funding opportunities, because there's going to be a lot of funding nationally in this space which, we can tap into. So, if you are, the first cab off the rank, sometimes, got the opportunity to, get into that funding. So, I'm comfortable as is, and just let's have the officers have a closer look at it. And happy to move. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Booth, and then we'll go Jackson and Scott.
Yeah,
Thank
look, I think there's a duplication. There's so many duplications going on, and I don't support that at all. So, yeah.
Councillor Jackson, were you seconding, or you had a comment? I'll come back to that. Councillor Scott.
I would like to see that recommendation come in the July meeting. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and I don't see. As I said, I support the trust, but I think there's a little bit more work to be done on what that looks like. So if we're coming back in July, I think that recommendation needs to come back then.
Dr. Driver.
So what I've offered to do is by next Friday have a more comprehensive proposal on what that trust might look like. I'll submit that to Andrew and his team, and it will be up to them to work up something that can come back to your July meeting. So, I will get it well and truly underway. Absolutely, you can't support the trust with what's on the table at the moment. You need something much more robust, and I will make a first cut at that by next Friday.
Thank you. I probably tend to agree with Councillor Scott in that not wanting to get the cart before the horse, and when you're thinking about who's going to sit on that committee, we're not clear, we are clear, but we're waiting for a report to come back on what are the biggest actions and that we need to do first, and out of that I thought would create the makeup and the terms of reference and anything else for that committee. So I probably sit with Councillor Scott, but I'm only one person, and if somebody wants to put the motion as it stands, Dr. Driver.
One last thing, in terms of what are the major actions you can act on, Reece and Co will be pulling together the actions that have been identified so far, but we've only looked at 6 out of 17 topics. There's 11 other topics, so we're not going to have a full list of actions for you to feed into that trust. Part of the purpose of the trust is to determine which are the main actions once we've looked at all those other topics. So the report that will come through in your July meeting will be, this is what Reece and Co have distilled out of the report so far, plus a recommendation around the trust and how it might address the future given what we've learned so far.
I would have thought that Reece's priorities is actually delving deeper than that and bringing back to us what are our priorities in our district. Yeah.
Madam Chair, on both those points, this is a parallel process. The internal work, which we dealt with through our existing decision-making structure, staff team, long-term plan, which is about what we do as a council, and the wider community opportunities for action, which could be picked up by a trust. So it's two vehicles for two parts of the process.
We're just really, I guess, seeking council direction on whether you actually support the formation of an entity, and we will go away and do that work and report back on the mechanics of that.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. So I'm hearing a couple of mixed views around the table on whether we support the creation of this entity. Does anybody else want to share the view, or we go back to the motion that Mayor Bowen has? Councillor Puddington.
I think I support yourself and Councillor Scott that while they are in tandem, we need some clear direction of what the trust is going to do before we create it. So we're cart before the horse in my view. I support it, but if I was going to stand on it, and I think it's dangerous that we're identifying the stakeholders. If it's just a trust that we're going to support, you know what I mean? It's almost as though we're directing who's going to be on it in the way it's presented there, which I think is dangerous.
So perhaps the recommendation, if I'm reading the room right, is that we support the council officers bringing back to us, and it will realistically have to be July, won't it? Because our meeting is next week and then July after that, along with their content or their report back based on the strategy, together with some a recommendation about the trust and how that might look, and then we decide at that point. So the question now is, do we support them going and doing that work? Have I... Councillor Booth doesn't, but is there somebody who would like to...
I think it's way too broad and it's so speculative. Nothing, as I said, there's nothing factual in this report.
So I think
it's way too broad.
But that's the point, Councillor Booth, is the officers will come back to us in July with a firmer proposal about supporting the trust, and then we can discuss and vote on it at that point.
Well, surely we need to redefine the scope a little bit more, keep them actually concentrated on exactly what we're doing here in our local region.
Are you talking about the scope of the report they are
If
doing,
they go
or the
away and
scope
do
of the
that,
trust?
we don't want, this is like saving the world. We're actually South Canterbury. So what is directly relevant to our ratepayers here in South Canterbury is actually what I'm saying.
And we've already moved recommendation 3, that's instructed them to go and do that work. And so this recommendation is purely about, do we support in principle the creation of the trust? Or, officers going away and bringing back to us at the next meeting what that might look like, what support looks like, and we make a decision on it then.
Well, no.
Does somebody want to put...
So I will move that.
Sorry, Ash, I'll go back to Nigel, who moved the original recommendation.
Yeah, look, I'm actually comfortable with as it is, so I'm happy, and I see Councillor Jackson had seconded it, so I'm happy to have that put to the council. And look, I think we're overthinking this. There's going to be 2 work streams. There's going to be council work streams, there's going to be work streams outside of council, and it's only to support and principles, preparations too. So that when we come back in July, that there's lined up, they can have a lot more information for us on both sides. So I think we're just overthinking, you know, that I think we're still going to achieve the things that are important to Timaru District and South Canterbury, so I personally don't have any issue with it.
Okay, so we have the resolution on the floor, proposed by Mayor Bowen and seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favour? Or we may have to raise our hands actually, thank you. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and against?
I want July added in there. It needs to have some words around there about it being presented back in July. At the moment, it doesn't say anything, just go off.
Okay.
Sorry, just a point of order, I think as far as standing orders and process, I think the comments are, yeah, I'm sorry, but I think that your point's relevant, but probably after the fact. Yeah.
I think, sorry, well, the motion's on the floor and we have 5 in favour and only 9 people at the meeting, and so the motion has been carried. Thank you. Resolution 5, I'm not sure if we need to put this, given the previous conversation, but that council officers investigate the feasibility and method of creation of such an entity, identifying potential stakeholders and funding. So is there anyone that would like to put that to the floor, because I'm not sure that it is required? Yes, Mr Taylor.
Probably true that it's covered in the previous recommendation, but Councillor Scott, this is the point where you could say the timetable for it. So if yeah.
Did you want to put another resolution, Councillor Scott, or are you happy that the conversation in the room and everyone seems to be on the same page with the timetable?
I think everyone is the same page, but I think it's important to put timelines around it, and so we don't go off. So as I would like to see that is brought back to the table in July.
So are you moving a resolution that the reports are brought back to council in July?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Piddington. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So I think that is the end of the meeting. Oh, no, sorry, I always forget to do this and I've got it on my thing. Sorry. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation, and Dr Driver for the amount of work you've put in there, and also like to once again acknowledge the time that the working group and the community have put into this, and so I really thank you for that. And with that, I think we've moved all the recommendations, so there's nothing more to do there. All I need to do is close the meeting at 11:16, only about half an hour late. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we take 5 just between meetings, Councillor.
Thank you. We good? Tēnā koutou, good morning and welcome to Infrastructure Committee. I would like to welcome first our community board members, Gay Broker from Temuka, Kathy Wilkins from Pleasant Point, and Jan Finlinson from Geraldine. Thank you for attending. Welcome. I have an apology from Councillor Peter Burt. I will happy to move that. Have a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Move that. Any identifications of urgent business? Identifications of a minor nature. Has anyone got a minor nature? Yes.
Yeah, just like a discussion around City Town and the way it's moving forward, or where it exactly is at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't need to move that, do I? No. Right. Any conflicts of interest to be noted? No, thank you. Chairman's report. Since our last Infrastructure Committee, I've attended the People and Performance Committee meeting, a citizenship, the council meeting. I've met with Andrew Dixon, our group manager, and I've attended the Paraiora Community Group meeting last Tuesday. I'm happy to move my report if I have a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Right, yeah. Perfect. Right, we will move to the confirmations of the minutes in 6.1. Any matters arising, any comments? That was on the 14th of March. Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Seconded by Councillor Pye. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Perfect. Right, moving on to our reports. We have two reports today. First, I'd like to welcome Susie, and we've got report 7.1, which is a road naming proposal. This is for an existing paper road which has been formed as part of a land subdivision development on Pages Road. And we have been presented with three options, so I'll hand that over to Susie to discuss further. Thank you.
Yeah, Morena, thank you very much for that. Yes, so it's a nice simple one, be able to give you some time back on the agenda. Obviously, might be needed for future, I'm not too sure. However, yeah, so we've worked with the landowners in this case surrounding the paper road. They've put through three proposals there. Their preferred is Morton Lane. We've run it through the criteria, I believe it fits the criteria, yeah, basically supposed to take it as read. If you're happy to. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? No. Okay, so I've got a mover from Councillor Piddington, seconded by Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Susie. Wow. Okay, we'll move on to our second report, 7.2, and I'd like to welcome Shell Bunt and Jared Cody. So 7.2 is... sorry, I think that's my phone that's making that noise. Review of the Te Moana and Orari Water Scheme Supply Policy. So this report requests the Infrastructure Committee to consider a proposed modification to the policy. So welcome, and the floor's yours.
So we will also assume that the report has been read. Happy to take questions. Did receive a question from Councillor Pye this morning via email, just wanting some clarification on the Te Moana water scheme area. So we do have this map, which I'm happy to pass around, which has kind of all our water schemes on one page, and the Te Moana one in its entirety is up here. So I will circulate that just for anyone that is wanting a refresher or is familiar. And the other question that Councillor Pye asked via email this morning was regarding the change, or why the number of connections appears to have decreased since when the policy was last reviewed in 2016. So the key word is rated connections rather than connections, and the reason for that was in approximately 2017, there was a change in the rateable valuation process. So a number of large land holdings that formerly would have been different rateable assessments were repackaged into the same assessment number. So in terms of, how many people we're supplying with water and that kind of thing, it doesn't actually change significantly. It's more of it was a nationwide legislative change around rating structures and land parcels.
Councillor Pye, does that answer your questions? Lovely. Councillor Shannon.
Thank you very much. Just looking at the map, I wasn't exactly sure what the area was as well. How many dwellings are there that would be deemed residential perhaps, not lifestyle or farming, and what would be the change in their cost of supply?
So there's no change. The majority of the changes to this policy are really just around a kind of operational changes for consistency, and it's around things like storage and things like that. When we start to talk about in point 25 of the report, financial and funding implications, one of the reasons we are tabling this report with updates to the policy is because since we brought the new water treatment plants online at the end of last year and did a bunch of reticulation upgrades, we now have the potential for people that may want additional water to request that additional water, and those fees that are outlined there are for people that would take that up. And
yeah, so there's no additional charges to existing consumers. Yeah. So predominantly the policy is around renewed or upgraded and new connections. And it's an operational document to enable that as part of the strategy of the Te Moana scheme upgrade, which includes the treatment plant, the renewals, the pipeline renewals, and basically the betterment of the scheme.
The annual charge is a separate issue, and that's covered through the annual plan process, which is the rating side of things. So, no, the policy is about water allocation and basically the fees and charges for getting that additional water allocation. So once you've got it, then you'll be rated accordingly on an annual basis. So, which is a separate issue. And just for the record, Te Moana rates are not increasing this coming financial year.
Mayor Bowen.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. No, just has that been updated on the website? Is that accurate as far as the numbers on the rating units? Because I know Te Moana residents have used that to sort of work through their own calculations on, depreciation and what should and shouldn't be in the numbers. So is that? Can we just check that is accurate if it isn't?
Yes, it definitely is accurate. The numbers do change very slightly all the time because, you may have a subdivision, even if it's just one person subdividing their land into one other block, periodically, not that often, but occasionally we do receive requests for people to disconnect from the scheme because they've, for example, chosen to put down their own private bore or something. So there is ongoing but very small fluctuation that happens all the time.
But we can be confident if we go to those numbers that within a dozen or so it'll be correct. Yeah.
Is that right? Councillor Oliver.
Just a quick question. So, how many? It says here 560 additional connections throughout the scheme over time. How many are there right now? Like for people that are wanting to subdivide in places like Woodbury, how many available right now?
Yeah, so right now each application would be assessed on its hydraulic capability to deliver that water.
Yeah.
So a first come first served basis, the hydraulic study's done for the application or the assessment is done for the application. So to make them, it's a bit of a tough question actually, but there is capability to deliver water in parts of the scheme, but depending on the demand and the clusters, if we say got an application for 6 or 7 connections for a subdivision that was allowable in that area, then it'd have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Yep.
So it's not a given, so to say, that you just get a connection by right. There is some, obviously, stuff in the background that has to happen to make that happen.
Yep,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, councillor Oliver. Did you want to?
Happy to move.
Okay. Any questions from the other side? All happy? Okay, so Mayor Barnes going to move the recommendation. I think there's two, isn't there? Recommendation 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jackson, thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for the report. Okay. We've got no matters of urgent business, so we're going to go to the consideration of the minor nature, which is a discussion regarding City Town. Mr Dixon, are you going to lead that? Okay. Councillor Pillington, the floor's yours to open up with your questions.
Cool. Regarding the City Town trials to date, I want to know how much they've cost to date and what feedback we've got around those trials. We've kind of gone from pause to not pause, so I'd like to know going forward what's being done and how it's being done. The feedback I'm getting is pink chairs on the piazza and a sandpit on Stafford Street aren't going to deliver any long-term benefit. So people want to know going forward what are the trials going to be and what sort of consultation some of the shop owners and those involved will get, so we don't have the debacle of what we've had to date.
Thank you, Councillor Pillington. So we'll work through those points. Perfect.
Thank you. So, yeah, as you are aware, there was a hold on the City Town project, and it was really driven by our consultants who put a stop work notice on it. And that was because there was getting a very much of a blurring of responsibilities on who was doing what. So, and they had significant health and safety concerns, particularly around that last trial that we did. So we have been working through with our consultants on that, and as part of that, we've really refocused and reset the whole project. And we've been coming into basically running it more like a proper program. We've got a program manager who is assisting us in that respect. We've also realised that there's a lot of different touch points in this organisation. There's a lot of different work streams. We've got, infrastructure renewals is going to be absolutely significant because basically all the pipe work, the water, sewage and stormwater systems, the power and the telecommunications all have to be renewed in the main streets. So that is coming up in the next 10 years. So we need to start programming that in and understanding that a bit more. There's also significant private investment that's required to make this project a success, and we of course got the bid project going on at the moment, and that's going to be a key component. So there's a lot of different touch points within this. So we have focused our consultants down to producing the master plan, and if we're saying also that some efficiencies, like there was a Caroline Bay master plan and a City Town master plan, let's just combine the two together. It's part of one project as such. So they are working on that, and that is their key focus, is to deliver that. In addition to that, we are looking at some quick wins within the CBD as well. And we are very conscious that things aren't, from a public perspective, aren't seeing things actually happening. So we've got a number of quick wins that we have identified, quite a list actually, that we will be presenting to the steering group in next week, I think, or week after. Anyway, soon, coming up anyway, 18th May. Is that right, Celine? Yeah. So we'll be presenting them, and they'll go through, the group will go through those and sort of endorse which ones they want to progress through in implementation. So as far as, the trials themselves are basically, we're planning no further trials at this stage. We believe we have enough information, and we're also going to be utilising, I guess, similar trials that were done in other centres. It seems crazy to reinvent the wheel each time. So there's savings there. So we're not planning to do any more trials. And also, of course, there's a risk when you do a trial too, particularly when it comes to vehicle movements and traffic control. You can't just do the trial without any intention to actually implement it permanently, because you get a bit of the wrong message going through there. So we'll learn that. It'll be part of the master plan. Having said that, there could be further trials later on, but we'll get this master plan in place at the first instance.
cost?
And cost? The cost, we've spent $2.1 million on this project to date. I have tried to get a breakdown of that. I haven't been able to in the time, but I can certainly produce that later this week. We can drill down into it. But that 2.1 million does not just consultants' costs. That includes the actual implementation of some of the trials, temporary traffic management. It includes the implementation of the swing ball thing, the table tennis table, those other things. And of course, we've been doing a lot of workshops as well, particularly around urban design. And that's another work stream that is having to be incorporated too, is the urban design. And we know that we need to start promoting inner city living to make this a success, and we're just looking at ways to enable that.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I would like a breakdown of the 2.1 million, what has been spent on consultants and other places, because that's a huge amount of money to have really gone nowhere to start with. I'm a bit concerned. I thought we started with a master plan and we were working on it. We're now going back to do another master plan. And where's the proper programmer coming in? I mean, surely that should have all been done before we set out on this project. Just seems to me we catch up. You know, where was the rigour at the front end?
Yeah, with the master plan was always going to be produced. It got muddied a little bit with a lot of other projects going on at the same time. So we refocused the consultants to actually produce that master plan as promised. So, it was always going to be delivered and it will be delivered. And that's the focus there. Program approach, I think there was a program, but again, as a lot of different work streams came online with the trials, it got a bit muddied as well. So we taken the opportunity with this pause to reset the project, get some rigour around it, and get that project in place. And I'm happy to share that, at some stage.
Yeah, look, we need the information because we're getting asked by the community and we seem to be leaping from one thing to another. So who is the programmer? Is that a consultant? Is that someone in-house? And how's that being delivered?
We're using a consultant to get this, the program developed, and he is liaising with our consultants and with other agencies that have stakeholders. We're going to be presenting that to the stakeholder group, and then after that we will be reporting to council. So you expect a full update.
And last question, the dog trial is not going ahead in the CBD, I've been asked that.
No formal dog trial. The reality is that dogs can be taken to the CBD now.
Yeah, I know, to restaurants, I understand that,
yeah.
but my question is, we went out to the people and told them there was going to be a trial.
Yeah, and
So-
that's something that we will raise with the steering group. And you're welcome to attend.
Andrew, do we have a timeline for when the master plan will be presented?
So we're looking at the master plan being presented basically by Christmas.
Yes.
Sorry, last point. I just looked back at my notes, was writing as you were going, Andrew. I suggested to these consultants when they first came, could they not take the best ideas of the other places they did it? And they said, no, we can't. Everyone's unique. So they've changed their mind on that.
I think it's fair to say we've changed their mind a little bit on that, but the trials that were done have been very useful in getting some information. There's been a lot of feedback and we're collating all that feedback. There was one trial that didn't go well, but there were a lot of other trials that were really successful. When you go to the Code Breakers one that we did, the night markets that we've been running, they've been extremely successful. Even the table tennis table, it's used a lot. So these trials are working. It's about revitalising the CBD, and it's creating that interest in there. We've got a few other quick wins along the same lines.
I guess I beg to differ last thing because, we already had markets. We could have put a table tennis table down there without a consultant. And Code Breakers are a success. Other towns charge for it. So, they haven't really delivered much. And we have seen none of this feedback we've been promised since the first trial.
because the feedback is being collated and it will be reported back. We're aiming for the June meeting.
Okay, I'll open the floor. Any questions? Yes, Mayor Bowen.
Oh, look, I think Councillor Piddington raises some, relevant points. The last steering group committee, some of these things were highlighted, and it was a really good meeting, I think. And process here or now is to go back to that steering group and then come back to council. But I think it's important that we extend those invites out to all those members that have an interest, because that's where the information is going to lie in the decision making before it comes back to council. But it has a better feel as far as the direction that we can now identify and get some action happening, so we can give some respite, if you like, to the retailers that are looking out at showgrounds and thinking, well, you've got all this money but you're not spending anything. So the projection forward does look a lot better than it has.
Thank you.
We're certainly confident that we've got this project back on track again, and we will be delivering some tangible things in the CBD.
Lovely. Councillor Booth.
Oh, look, just as a member of the strategy group, it would appear that there's probably been a slight under-resourcing coming from the council in support of our urban designers in the implementation of some of the things that they wanted to do. And so there's been a disconnect, I guess, and so that's the way I see it, and a lack of ownership taken from within the council on this project. And so that probably reinforces some of the ideas that Councillor Scott's spoken about getting some actual resource within our council that are capable of doing some of these jobs and projects that are not actually happening in a timely manner.
Okay. No further discussion. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Piddington. You happy with that, Mr Dixon? Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll come to the closure of infrastructure at 11:49. Oh, 12. 11:49. Thank you.
11:50. Community Services Committee meeting Tuesday, 2nd of May at 11:50. Special welcome obviously to our ladies, Gay Brocker Tamuka and Kath Wilkins, Pleasant Point Community Board, and Jan Finlayson from Geraldine. Welcome to Community Services meeting. Just noting apologies has been received from Peter Burt. I would like to move those. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Pye. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Identification of items of urgent business. Matters of minor nature. Stu, got any? No. Just kidding, sorry. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Is there any? Hopefully not. Okay, up to Chairperson's report. It's been quite busy, actually, since the 14th of March. I've attended several Theatre Royal and Heritage Facility Reference Group meetings alongside Councillor Piddington and Councillor Jackson and Mayor
Nigel, and we also attended the public stakeholder meeting. I attended the Youth Initiative Subcommittee meeting. I also went to the Museum BA5, which was excellent. Citizenship ceremonies, People and Performance Committee meeting. I had the privilege of attending Mark Lowe's farewell morning tea. It was a great event, and it was lovely to see the staff take the mick out of each other. It was awesome. Loved it. So thanks for the invite to that. Alongside my fellow councillors, Shannon and Jackson, I have finished my Making Good Decisions workshop, and I have completed my final post-assessment. I have not received my results. I better pass. So anyway, I've done that. So I'm glad to get that one off, that one done. I definitely will be having a celebration orange juice at the end of that. Donations and Loans Committee meeting, Timaru Community Drop-In Centre. I attended 1 hour late with Councillor Jackson and Mayor Nigel at the library, which was awesome. I've attended a Hall of Fame nomination meeting, and I also attended the Peel Forest landfill site visit alongside Councillor Oliver and Mayor Nigel and staff last week. It was really informative, so thank you very much, Vinci in particular, for organising that. I'd like to move my report. Could I have a seconder, please? Mayor Nigel, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against. Okay, confirmation of minutes held on Tuesday, 14th of March. I'll table those as read. Could I have a, thank you, Councillor Parker. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor Nigel. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Okay, now I would like to welcome Grant. Report today is on Donations and Loans Subcommittee and recommendations for funding. So I'll hand it over to you, Grant.
Right, so I'll take the paper as read, but just perhaps a couple of updates or clarifications just to talk about a couple of the applications. Firstly, Cardiac Kids. It was previously, it's a new organisation to the area. It used to be under, they used to run Jingle Bell Ball, and it was Heart Kids New Zealand. But what they found was that and they were a great generator of funds. That the funds were going all out of the area, and they were concerned about this, so they've created their own local chapter in conjunction with Mid Canterbury, and so that's this is their first application under that realm. So the idea was, of course, to keep the funds within the South Canterbury area. So that's one reason there. Young Farmers also, you'll note they had an application. The original application was about $24,000. Because they were unable to access the Caroline Bay Hall for their awards evening on the Friday evening, they've had to go to Winchester, and that involves a few additional costs of traffic management planned and also portaloos. So the committee had, the recommendation the committee made was basically for the cost of the hire in those areas. There was one other matter. The Lions Club applied for cameras down the bay, and the committee had raised some questions about how that would proceed going forward. So I've had those informal discussions with the organisation, and that'll be put in a letter if the recommendations are approved. Basically, it's looking at what sort of maintenance contracts are in place, what can be done when the penguins aren't landing, so to speak, and is it an opportunity to perhaps provide some promotional support of via VT or the like, so that matter will be followed up. But other than that, I think that's it as it stands, Madam Chairperson.
Thanks for that, Grant. Missed the meeting, so what are the cameras for? To protect the birds, to promote the area?
To be fair...
And what is the Lions Club to do? Because I thought there were two charitable trusts competing down there already, so is this a third?
They quickly, that was the first thing they said when I rang them, that you may be aware there's conflicting organisations on. They just want to get them up there, and then they'll have those in place. And then they said the politics regarding the two organisations is something completely separate. They said this is to provide support for the penguins, so to speak. That was their discussion.
What sort of percentage are we paying? So are we paying the whole thing? Or
We are. That's the percentage they've asked for, yeah.
May I just I believe it's in conjunction with Primeport as well. They've offered the site just right adjacent to there, and I think it's more about security.
One of the ones that stood out for me was when you were talking about the cardiac kids. Sign written gazebo for $5,000. What sort of gazebo are we talking about here? I bought one from Mitre 10 for $399. It's a pretty good one. So $5,000 seems like a lot of money for a gazebo.
They provided, I can give you a copy of the quotes if you want, they provided information regarding the gazebo. I also spoke to them about when they, if it's approved, that it is a flash one obviously, that we could perhaps put the council signage on it, and they were more than happy with that. If the council supports it, they're more than happy to have their signage on the gazebo. Just bear with me a sec.
I can add to that too. It's not just your $390 one that's going to blow away and rip. It was a commercial grade gazebo that's been quoted in there. Yeah.
Just regarding the penguin cameras again, did we get an answer on who's monitoring them and how often they're monitored and all those sorts of things? Because it's important that we know who's taking responsibility for the data.
To be fair, Councillor Oliver, they weren't totally clear on that. But that's all part of the information that came back from the committee that I would include, that we would be asking for a plan. But they did say they had, that it was all organised in respect of what was going to happen going forward, because I did stress that the council did not want to be responsible for ongoing maintenance, and they said that wouldn't be the case. So we can get confirmation of that. But because these, I had to go to them because this was, normally this used to be in public excluded, and it's good now that it's not. But so I had to go and talk to them beforehand, because they may well have seen what the recommendations were. As I said, they're not 100% clear. They just want to get the camera up there, and then I think they are going to work forward as to what. But they said there'd be no further ongoing requests to the council regarding this.
Yeah, look, and partly picking up on a point that Councillor Piddington raised about it was that one specifically was fully funded, but we actually were undersubscribed with that group of funding, so really important that we do push it out there. I was at a opening of the Glenetti Play Centre where we'd contributed some money for a deck, and it was a really positive story in the fact that they'd had really low numbers and, you know, great community organisation, you know, providing a play centre service for kids and family. Because of that funding, it helped support enablement, and it meant they could then access the back play area again because the deck was in disrepair. So some of those things are really good projects where, you know, it's not easy to get funding, but we do need to push it out there. So so this is a job of councillors. You know, if you're talking funding to people, just say, hey, we do have these available, and you know, talk to the team around, you know, whether they fit our particular funds. Thank you.
And I think too, just, sorry, going back to our penguin camera project, the committee did have a lot of questions around this, but also utilising other areas within the community like Venture Timaru. How could we promote this, you know, on a wider scale? So I think it is a really positive project, and I think more will come of it that will be positive. So I would like to see the recommendations stand, but obviously I will call for that in a moment. But I do think it's really positive for the community.
Just around the monitoring, it's a good question, because we actually did discuss that as well, and with the idea that ideally it would be quite good if it was actually live streamed back to perhaps one of the websites that so you could click on a link and actually, because it actually will look out over the bay and out over towards the Southern Alps as well. So it's something from our tourism side of view that actually, while it may do one job, it could do actually two or three. So we did discuss that, but obviously perhaps that, yeah.
So, okay, moved by, so the Community Services Committee approves the recommendations from the Donations and Loan Subcommittee, moved by Mayor Nigel and seconded by Councillor Oliver. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, well done team. Consideration of urgent business items. consideration of minor nature matters. I will close the meeting at 12:03. Thanks. Good talking.
For the, let's see, what are we? Commercial Strategy Committee. So I'd like to open the meeting, and we have an apology from Councillor Burt. Would someone like to, any other apologies? Someone else? Sally's going to move that, and I'll second. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Okay. Identification of any items of urgent business. Have we got any urgent business? Okay. Identification of matters of a minor nature. Got none of those either. Okay. Declaration of conflicts of interest. And the chairperson's report. Well, I've been to various functions, played golf at Millbrook, a couple other things. So, yeah, council meetings, yeah, so it's been just business as usual, really. And that will bring us to the confirmation of the...
Can you just move your report?
Okay, I'll move my report. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Those in favour? Aye. Okay, so then we'll go on to the confirmation of the minutes. So, has anyone got anything to say about the minutes? Would someone like to move those? Scott and Michelle? Those in favour say aye. Aye. Okay. So, let's go to reports. Item 7.1, council investments and borrowings. So, hi.
That's Andrea.
So I'll open it to Andrea to tell us all the highlights of this exciting report. Oh.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is a standard quarterly report that comes from our financial advisors, Bancorp. So we speak with Bancorp on a regular basis and receive their advice on borrowings and investments. They've assured us that there are no issues associated with our current position that we hold. So just from between December and now, we borrowed an additional $24 million to cover future capital expenditure that we're anticipating over the next 3 months. And of that, we have $30 million cash investments sitting on hand when we need them. And our current average cost of borrowings is 4.06%. In a summary.
Have we got any questions from the floor in regards to the report? Okay, I guess, I assume that the latest, borrowings that you incurred will be at the interest rates that I can see on the sheet in front of me, around about 5.7%.
Yes, they are.
And so, what sort of interest, we've got 169,000, what's our total, or roughly our total interest amount that would be paying? Have we got a bit of a graph on that as into it, or is that on this debt to cover ratio graph? Because I assume that as our timeline of borrowings comes off, that our interest bill will climb.
Yes, it will, but then we've also got our interest rate swaps, which essentially offset some of that interest expenditure.
And what quantum is that? Do you know?
So there's $80 million or $81 million of swaps at this point.
Out for five years or something like that, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So we can include a net interest line on the graph if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay. Is there any other? Scotty?
Just a note for the future, please, if there's any way that you can present these in portrait, that would be lovely.
I know this is really a global report. I mean, all the commentary's got nothing to do with us. Oh, I see. Sorry. Okay, noted. Okay, if that's all, do I move that or not? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah. Stu, second up. Those in favour, say aye. Aye. Okay. Consideration of urgent business items, there were none. Consideration of minor nature matters, there were none. So I'll close the meeting.
At 12:09.
What's that?
12:09.
Yeah. Perfect.